Ladies and gentlemen, tonight I want to speak not from a position of authority or achievement, but from the deeper, quieter place where real decisions are born. The human heart, the complicated maze of the mind, and the fragile circuitry that makes all of us more alike than different. For much of my life, people have assumed that vision comes from logic, that progress comes from engineering, that breakthroughs come from those who live inside data, numbers, algorithms. But I've learned that none of that means anything if it isn't grounded in the emotional, psychological, and biological truth of being human. If you strip away the noise, the headlines, the expectations, what's left is something simple, a human trying to make sense of the world and trying, desperately at times, to create a better one. And I believe that every person in this room, regardless of your path, your profession, your background, is driven by that same invisible force. It's the reason we wonder, dream, suffer, heal, break, rebuild, and keep moving forward. It's the reason the mind keeps working even when the world feels like it's falling apart. It's the reason hope exists at all. For years, I've been fascinated by what actually drives people, not the surface level goals they talk about, but the deep cognitive currents beneath those goals, the things we don't say out loud, the things we don't even fully understand about ourselves. Neuroscience tells us that nearly every decision we make, from the person we choose to love, to the risks we take, to the moments we finally dare to change, begins in the subconscious long before we are aware of it. Our neural networks predict patterns, anticipate threats, seek connection, and shape our future before our conscious mind has the chance to intervene. And yet, we live as if we are fully in control. There's a strange beauty in that illusion. It gives us courage. It gives us the willingness to believe we can override our programming, our trauma, our conditioning. And sometimes we actually can. Sometimes the human mind chooses a new path, a path no one expected. And that single choice can alter everything. I've spent years observing the way people behave under pressure, under fear, under love, under the weight of impossible expectations. What I've learned is this: the moments that define us are rarely the ones we prepare for. They're the moments that crash into our lives uninvited, the moments that test whether our values were ever real or merely convenient. Those moments force us to decide who we are, and more importantly, who we're willing to become. There were times when the pressure felt unbearable, times when every decision carried the weight of thousands of people's jobs, millions of people's hopes, or entire industries, depending on whether a risk would succeed or fail. And in those moments, the mind becomes a battlefield. Logic fights fear, vision fights doubt, ambition fights exhaustion. And somewhere in the chaos, a single thought emerges, not loud, but steady: keep going. Most people think resilience is an attitude, a mindset, a personality trait. But neuroscientifically speaking, resilience is actually a rewiring process. Each time you face adversity, every time you push through fear, every moment you refuse to give up, the brain restructures itself. It builds new neural pathways. It strengthens synaptic connections. It literally becomes more capable of withstanding pressure in the future. In other words, failing didn't break me, failing built me. Every stumbling moment, every miscalculation, every seemingly catastrophic decision created the mental architecture I rely on today. And I want every person listening right now to understand this. Your brain is not fixed. Your fate is not fixed. Your identity is not fixed. You are a living system, dynamic, adaptive, constantly updating. You are far more malleable than you have ever been told. And yet, even as the brain evolves, the heart often lags behind. Emotion does not respond to logic. It doesn't obey timelines or technological precision. You can design a rocket with flawless physics, but you cannot design a life with flawless emotions. You cannot schedule grief. You cannot program love. You cannot debug loneliness. These are the human variables that refuse to be optimized. They must be understood, respected, navigated with patience and humility. For a long time, I didn't realize how much emotional suppression shapes a person's mind. Many people who strive for big goals convince themselves that emotions are obstacles, that vulnerability is a distraction. They armor their hearts because they fear it will slow them down. But neuroscience paints a different picture. The more we suppress emotion, the more the amygdala overreacts. Stress hormones spike, cognitive performance declines, creativity contracts. We become less capable, not more. Ignoring emotional reality doesn't make us stronger. It quietly dismantles us from the inside. It took years for me to understand that strength isn't the absence of emotion. Strength is the willingness to feel it fully without losing the ability to act. There were nights when the silence felt like an enemy, when fatigue carved its weight into every thought, when the road ahead seemed impossible. And in those moments, the greatest breakthroughs didn't come from intelligence. They came from honesty. Honesty with myself, honesty with the people around me, honesty with the truth that I could not carry every burden alone. Sometimes the most transformative words a person can say are simply, "I need help." This is not weakness. It is a neurological and emotional reset. When we admit our limits, the prefrontal cortex regains control. The vagus nerve relaxes, cortisol stabilizes, the mind becomes capable again. Vulnerability, paradoxically, restores strength. But perhaps the most profound realization, the one I want to share with you tonight, is that life's most important decisions are rarely made in front of others. They happen in quiet moments long before the world sees the results. They happen when no one is watching, when the mind is exhausted, when the stakes are invisible but enormous. And those decisions determine everything that comes after. I've met people who believe certainty is the key to success. That confidence must be unshakable. But in reality, uncertainty is where discovery lives. Every major breakthrough, technological or personal, begins with the willingness to step into the unknown. The brain interprets uncertainty as danger. But if you can train yourself to interpret the unknown as possibility, your entire life changes. The truth is, the world does not reward the illusion of perfection. It rewards the courage to remain curious. Curiosity keeps the brain young. Curiosity builds new neural networks. Curiosity expands empathy, broadens vision, and creates solutions no algorithm could predict. But curiosity requires something people often overlook: emotional safety. If you live in fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of being misunderstood, your brain shifts from exploration mode to survival mode. You stop learning, you stop imagining, you stop daring to change. That is why every person needs at least one place in their life. One relationship, one environment, one moment, where they can exist without fear, where their mind can stretch instead of defend, where their heart can breathe instead of brace. Without that emotional oxygen, the mind suffocates long before the body ever does. And I learned this the hard way. There were moments when the world felt like it demanded everything: innovation, leadership, resilience, responsibility. And in those moments, I forgot that the mind is not a machine. It cannot run endlessly without rest. It cannot perform without connection. It cannot thrive without meaning. Meaning, at its core, is what determines the architecture of the human brain. People think meaning is philosophical, abstract, poetic. But to a neuroscientist, meaning is biological. It is the framework that tells the brain what to fight for, what to sacrifice for, what to endure for. Without meaning, dopamine collapses, motivation deteriorates, and the body begins to move through life on autopilot. But when meaning is clear, when you know what or who you're living for, the brain becomes capable of extraordinary feats. Meaning is why the human spirit refuses to collapse even under impossible circumstances. It's the reason people survive heartbreak, rebuild after failure, and continue loving even after they've been hurt. Meaning is the invisible architecture that supports us when nothing else can. And what fascinates me most is that meaning isn't discovered once. It evolves. It shifts with age, experience, loss, growth. The priorities you held at 20 will not be the same at 40, and they shouldn't be. That evolution is a sign that the brain is adapting to your changing emotional landscape. But there's something deeper I've observed. something that has reshaped the way I view human behavior. Meaning becomes strongest when it is shared. You can have talent, intelligence, discipline, but without someone or something to anchor your purpose to, the mind becomes volatile. Not because it is weak, but because humans are wired for connection. From birth, our nervous system learns how to regulate itself through other people. A baby's heartbeat stabilizes in the presence of a caregiver. Adults mirror the same pattern. Our emotions, our stress levels, our capacity to think clearly are all influenced by the people around us. This is why the wrong environment can destroy ambition, while the right one can ignite it. It's why one conversation can change a life, why one person believing in you can alter your entire sense of identity. We like to think we are independent beings, but biologically, psychologically, emotionally, our minds are interdependent. We exist in a constant state of co-regulation with the people we trust. For much of my life, I underestimated the profound impact a single relationship could have on the direction of an entire mission. But I've seen firsthand how the presence of the right person can stabilize your thoughts, amplify your courage, and quiet the noise that once felt overwhelming. And I've also seen how the absence of that person can destabilize even the strongest mind. Humans do not thrive in isolation, not neurologically, not emotionally, not spiritually. Yet many high-pressure individuals convince themselves they must carry everything alone. They isolate not because they want to, but because they believe it is the only path to progress. They mistake solitude for strength. But the truth is, isolation drains the brain's energy reserves. It reduces cognitive flexibility, impairs memory, and diminishes problem-solving capacity. The mind becomes a closed loop, incapable of generating new possibilities. What I want you to understand tonight is that connection is not a distraction from greatness. Connection is the foundation of it. The mind becomes sharper when it feels supported. The heart becomes braver when it feels understood. Creativity expands when the nervous system feels safe. And people perform at their highest level when they know they are not alone. There's a moment in every person's life when they realize that the pursuit of achievement is not the same as the pursuit of fulfillment. Achievement satisfies the mind, fulfillment nourishes the soul. Achievement builds your raison, fulfillment builds your identity. Achievement can impress the world, fulfillment can heal it, and fulfillment, unlike achievement, requires depth, emotional depth, relational depth, psychological honesty. I've seen people chase success so intensely that they forget why they wanted it in the first place. And when they finally achieve it, they feel an emptiness they didn't anticipate. Because success without emotional meaning is like oxygen without breath, technically present, but not sustaining. The mind cannot thrive on accomplishment alone. It needs connection, purpose, internal alignment. And that alignment begins with understanding yourself, your fears, your patterns, your triggers, your strengths, the wounds you've hidden, the dreams you've abandoned. Most people think self-awareness is introspection, but it's more than that. Self-awareness is a neurological recalibration. It requires honesty, curiosity, and the courage to explore the parts of yourself you've avoided. But once you do, you gain something rare, the ability to choose your life, instead of being unconsciously shaped by it. Throughout my journey, there were moments when I had to confront uncomfortable truths about myself. Times when I realized I had been driven by fear rather than purpose, or by expectation rather than authenticity. Times when I realized I had built systems that were impressive but unsustainable, both internally and externally. And in those moments, change did not come from brilliance. It came from humility. From acknowledging that even the most capable mind is still human, still fragile, still learning. Humility, I've discovered, is not the opposite of confidence. It is the foundation of it. When you are humble, you don't need to pretend you know everything. You don't need to defend your ego. You don't need to hide your uncertainties. Humility frees the brain from the exhausting task of maintaining an image. It creates space for curiosity, collaboration, innovation. It allows you to listen instead of react, to learn instead of assume, to evolve instead of stagnate. And evolution is the essence of human potential. The brain is designed to grow, adapt, stretch, but growth rarely happens in comfort. Growth happens when your world falls apart and you're forced to build a new one. Growth happens when you lose something you thought you needed, only to discover you were capable of more than you imagined. Growth happens when you are brave enough to step into moments that terrify you. Not because you have no fear, but because something inside you whispers that the fear is not the full story. Tonight, I want to speak especially to the people who feel like they're carrying more than they can handle. To the ones who feel unseen, misunderstood, or overwhelmed by a life that demands so much. I want you to know that the strength you're searching for isn't built in the easy chapters. It's forged in the moments you survived even when you didn't think you could. Your resilience is not theoretical, it is lived. It is written into your neural pathways. It is etched into your character. You've already done the impossible. You've continued. But there comes a point in every journey when survival is no longer enough. The goal shifts from endurance to alignment, from carrying the weight to understanding it, from holding everything in to letting something or someone in. And that shift is not weakness. It is wisdom. One of the most important lessons I've learned is that people don't break because they are weak. They break because they tried to be stronger than every emotion that lived inside them. But emotions are not enemies to conquer. They are signals to interpret. They guide us toward what matters, what hurts, what needs attention. Ignoring them doesn't make them disappear. It turns your internal world into a storm. And sometimes, all it takes to calm that storm is the presence of one person who listens without judgment. One person who understands not your accomplishments, but your humanity. One person whose compassion resets your nervous system in ways no logic ever could. We talk a lot about intelligence. Artificial intelligence, human intelligence, emotional intelligence. But the most underrated form of intelligence is relational intelligence, the ability to nurture trust, to communicate truthfully, to support others without losing yourself. Relational intelligence is what determines the quality of your life more than any other metric. Because even if you build remarkable things, even if you achieve what others consider impossible, none of it feels meaningful if you have no one to share it with, no one who understands the journey beneath the surface. And if there is one message I want to leave you with tonight, it's this: success is not measured by what you build, but by who you become in the process, by the lives you touch, by the courage you cultivate, by the love you give and receive, by the moments you choose vulnerability over performance, truth over image, meaning over momentum. You are not here to live a life that merely looks impressive. You are here to live a life that feels authentic, a life that is aligned with your values, driven by your curiosity, sustained by your relationships, and grounded in what your heart knows is real. There is a point in every human journey when the mind and heart finally meet in the same place, when logic no longer argues with emotion, when ambition no longer battles vulnerability, when the person you are and the person you're trying to become finally begin to align. That moment does not arrive suddenly. It comes slowly, quietly, after countless nights of reflection, after choices that felt uncertain, after risks that stretched you, after conversations that revealed truths you weren't ready to hear. And when it arrives, it feels less like a victory and more like a release, a sense that you no longer need to outrun yourself. In that moment, the world around you doesn't change, but your relationship to it does. The noise grows softer, the pressure feels lighter. The things you once feared lose their power. You begin to realize that most of the obstacles you faced were not external, they were internal. They were stories you told yourself, expectations you inherited, and assumptions you carried for too long. And once you let go of them, the mind becomes free in a way that is difficult to describe but impossible to forget. Freedom, I've learned, is not the ability to do everything. It is the ability to choose what truly matters. And what matters most is rarely what we chase early in life. It's not recognition, not status, not validation, not applause. What matters is peace, the sense of being at ease within your own mind. Peace is not passive. It's a skill, one that requires reflection, discipline, boundaries, and a deep understanding of your emotional patterns. Some people spend their entire lives searching for peace in external achievements, not realizing that peace can only be found by turning inward. And ironically, when you find that internal peace, your external work becomes better. Your creativity expands, your vision sharpens, your resilience increases. You stop acting from fear and start acting from clarity. The brain operates at a higher level when it is not fighting itself. What once required tremendous effort begins to flow more naturally. Decisions become easier, relationships become healthier, life becomes lighter. Yet none of this happens without facing your own shadows. Every person carries unspoken fears: fear of loss, fear of inadequacy, fear of being misunderstood, fear of disappointing others. These fears shape our behavior more than we admit. They affect how we love, how we lead, how we trust, how we dream. And if we never confront them, they quietly limit the life we are capable of creating. Confronting your fears does not mean eliminating them. It means understanding them. It means recognizing the childhood experiences, the past relationships, the failures, the moments of rejection or humiliation that created those fears. The brain remembers pain more vividly than joy because survival depends on it. But survival is not the same as living. To live fully, you must learn to differentiate between an old wound and a present reality. You must learn to update your mental software so you're not navigating the present with maps from the past. There were moments in my life when fear disguised itself as practicality, when hesitation disguised itself as strategy, when self-protection disguised itself as logic. But underneath those disguises lived the truth, that I was afraid of losing something I valued, afraid of risking the stability I had built, afraid of stepping into a chapter that required vulnerability instead of certainty. And the turning point came when I realized that fear and meaning are intertwined. The things we fear losing the most usually reveal what we care about the most. When you identify that, when you acknowledge what truly matters to you, your decisions become clearer. You stop chasing illusions. You stop tolerating anything that drains your energy or misaligns your values. You start walking toward the things and people that bring your mind alive. And that is where transformation begins. Transformation is not a dramatic moment. It's a series of quiet choices. It's the choice to speak the truth instead of hiding behind convenience. The choice to rest when your mind is exhausted instead of forcing it to push harder. The choice to repair a relationship instead of abandoning it. The choice to take responsibility instead of placing blame. The choice to forgive yourself for who you were when you didn't know better. These choices reshape your neural pathways. They change the way you view yourself. They determine the life you end up living. But transformation is also relational. There are people whose presence shifts the trajectory of your mind. People who inspire you to think bigger, dream deeper, feel more courageously. People who challenge your assumptions, call out your blind spots, and remind you of the parts of yourself you had forgotten. People who calm your nervous system with nothing more than their voice, their patience, their belief in you. People who make you feel seen in a way that brings your entire life into focus. When you encounter someone like that, it becomes impossible to ignore. Your mind reorganizes around the clarity they bring. Your values sharpen, your ambitions mature, your emotional world deepens. And suddenly, you realize that human connection is not a distraction from your purpose. It is part of your purpose. It shapes who you become. It anchors your decisions. It reminds you of the reasons behind your efforts, the reasons that data and logic alone could never provide. But connection requires courage. It requires the willingness to be honest, to be imperfect, to let someone witness the parts of you that are still evolving. Most people fear that vulnerability will make them look weak. But in reality, vulnerability is what creates trust. It builds emotional resonance. It forms the neural foundations of intimacy, collaboration, and love. Without vulnerability, relationships become transactional. With it, relationships become transformative. And here's the truth most people never hear: the right relationship does not complicate your life. It clarifies it. It doesn't drain your energy. It expands it. It doesn't create chaos. It calms your internal world so you can face external challenges with greater strength. The right person doesn't complete you. They amplify who you already are. And when two people grow in the same direction, when their emotional, intellectual, and spiritual alignment deepens over time, their connection becomes a force far more powerful than anything either could build alone. But to experience that, you must be willing to show your real self, not the curated version of you that the world sees, not the strong version, not the successful version, not the strategic version. The real version, the one with doubts, fears, imperfections, dreams, wounds, hopes. Because that is where genuine connection forms. That is where emotional resonance happens. That is where love, in all its forms, becomes transformative instead of fragile. I've learned that the greatest breakthroughs in life don't happen in front of an audience. They happen in private moments of truth. When you admit what you really want, when you acknowledge who really matters, when you finally choose authenticity over image, when you stop running from the parts of yourself that need healing and start walking toward the parts that need nurturing. These moments rarely look dramatic, but they shape the architecture of your future. Tonight, I want to leave you with this: you are not defined by your past, by your fears, by your failures, or by the expectations placed on you. You are defined by your capacity to learn, to evolve, to connect, to love, to create meaning from the chaos of life. The mind is extraordinary, infinitely capable, but it reaches its highest potential only when guided by a heart that has learned to feel deeply, honestly, and courageously. If you remember anything from this talk, let it be this: greatness is not built from certainty. It is built from curiosity, vulnerability, alignment, and the courage to follow the quiet truth inside you. Even when the world doesn't understand it, life will test you, reshape you, break you open in ways you never expected. But every moment of struggle is shaping a stronger, wiser, more compassionate version of you. You are not here to live a life that merely looks successful. You are here to live a life that feels true. A life guided not just by your mind, but by your heart, the part of you that knows what matters even when logic cannot explain it. Trust that part. Listen to it. Let it lead you where you're meant to go. And when you finally reach the place where your purpose, your peace, your passion, and your relationships all align, you will understand something profound. The journey was never about becoming impressive. It was about becoming whole. Thank you. And before I step away from this stage tonight, there is one more truth I want to leave with you. Something I did not plan to say, but something that feels necessary in this moment. Sometimes the most important words we speak are the ones we didn't prepare. When the lights dim, when the audience goes home, when the noise fades and the world becomes quiet again, what matters most is not the applause or the reaction. It is the question you carry with you. What will you do with the time you have? Time is the great equalizer. No invention can multiply it. No success can extend it. No achievement can negotiate with it. And yet, time becomes meaningful only when we choose to fill it with intention, with the people we value, the work that aligns with our soul, the moments that remind us why we're alive. You don't need to change the entire world to live a significant life. You only need to change the parts of the world that touch your heart. If there is someone you care about, tell them. If there is a dream that scares you, pursue it. If there is a truth you've been avoiding, face it. If there is a version of yourself you're becoming, step into it. The mind will come up with 1,000 reasons to wait, but the heart only needs one reason to begin. And maybe that's the real message tonight: begin. Begin even if you're unsure. Begin even if you're afraid. Begin even if the path is unclear. Begin because life does not reward hesitation. it rewards courage. And when you look back years from now, you won't remember the moments you played it safe. You'll remember the moments you dared to live. Thank you, truly, for listening with your mind, your curiosity, and your heart. There's something else I want to share, something that only becomes clear after years of watching people rise, fall, rebuild, and rise again. Most people underestimate their own impact. You may not realize it, but someone is watching you, quietly from a distance, and drawing strength from the way you carry yourself, from the way you get back up, from the way you keep trying, from the way you love, even after being hurt, from the way you stay kind, even when life gives you every reason not to be. We don't always know whose life we're influencing, or how deeply. Sometimes a single act of honesty inspires someone to tell their truth. Sometimes a small moment of bravery gives someone else permission to be courageous. Sometimes your resilience becomes someone else's roadmap. And the remarkable thing is, you may never know. You may never hear about the person you helped heal. You may never meet the person you inspired to chase a dream. You may never realize the quiet ripples of change you triggered just by refusing to give up. But that impact is real. It exists in ways the world cannot measure. This is why you must live with intention. Not because the world is always watching, but because someone is, and they are learning from you. You are shaping futures you'll never see, influencing decisions you'll never hear about, and rescuing souls you'll never meet. And if you ever feel small or insignificant, remember this: even a single candle can guide someone through the dark. But here is the part we often forget. The candle does not lose its flame by lighting another. Your strength doesn't weaken by supporting someone. Your hope doesn't shrink by giving others something to believe in. Your compassion doesn't diminish when you extend it generously. In fact, the opposite happens. What you give multiplies. What you share returns. What you offer becomes the architecture of a life filled with meaning. And meaning, real meaning, is built from presence, being present with your purpose, being present with your people, being present with yourself. So slow down sometimes, look around, look within. Notice the moments you're living instead of racing past them. Because these moments, ordinary as they seem, are the threads that weave the most extraordinary chapters of your life. If there is one final gift you can give yourself, let it be this: the permission to live fully, to feel deeply, to try boldly, to care fearlessly, to forgive gently, to dream recklessly, and most of all, to believe, even when doubt whispers that you shouldn't. Because the truth is, every meaningful life begins with a moment of belief, not from the world, from within. Thank you for staying here with me tonight, not just with your attention, but with your openness, your presence, and your willingness to feel something real.